Well, now let's get some more analysis on this from Patrick Young, an expert in global financial markets from the DV Advisors Group. Patrick, thanks so much for joining us here on RT International to talk about this. Well, the sum of 20 billion euros sounds like, quite a promise there. But can Europe actually afford this?
Well, let's put it one way. I mean, Europe can afford incredible things if it really wants to spend it. But ultimately, can Europe afford the political capital? No. And actually, we've just gone back 3-4 months here, Marina. The situation has not changed. Months ago, the free trade agreement collapsed. A, because it was skewed in favour of the European Union. Secondly, because the European Union offered a derisory 800 million euros. Now, the European Union's financial situation has not changed. We've got all manner of people, the governing party in the UK, all sorts of politicians across Europe. Even Mr. Tusk from neighbouring Poland is saying that effectively it's going to be impossible to manage to be very lavish with funds. At the same time, frankly, the new Ukrainian government, as it is effectively in la-la land. I mean, they're already asking for $35 billion. That's up from the $15 billion that had been agreed by the president, Mr. Yanukovych, just a few months ago with Russia. And therefore, it's really a mess. The European Union does not have the political capital to spend on rescuing Ukraine from 20 years of economic mismanagement, given the problems in the backyard of the Eurozone.
Well, but actually, let's take a look at the economic situation in Ukraine. As judging from what you just said, it's in dire straits here. But how much money would actually solve their problems? I mean, okay, 20 billion euros, as you said, is not really enough. But looking at the state of their economy, how much would they actually need?
OK, well, to take the numbers very, very quickly, instantaneously, they need to pay off about $6.5 billion this year in government debt. Over the course of the next 18 months, they probably have to repay about $15 billion of government debt. Commerzbank this morning independently verified that there is at least $1 billion in bad debt to Russia for gas supplies. It could be as high as $3 billion is owed at the moment. The overall budget deficit, the amount of money the Ukrainian government is spending, which it doesn't have, is also about $6.5 billion. Add to that the fact that obviously Russia has already advanced $3 billion into the kitty of the $15 billion programme. And as you can see, we're very, very rapidly up around a $15 billion and beyond number for the Ukrainian economy.
Well, interesting you said, Patrick.
Moreover is
interesting what you said.
Yep.
Sorry for jumping in. I mean, you said that Russia has already added $3 billion here. But, in a press conference in Kiev, Catherine Ashton said, quote, let me quote her here, "As a neighbor, we expect Russia to support Ukraine." I mean, how much more support does she expect from Russia here?
Well, I mean, this is exactly the total problem with Mrs. Ashton, a complete non-entity who in a typical Brussels shuffle was put entirely out of her depth as the head of diplomacy for the European Union. I mean, what on earth can she want? Indeed, Russia had already pledged $15 billion, which would have actually got Ukraine out of the hole. That was actually inconvenient for the USA and the European Union because although they weren't willing to put in any sort of reasonable amount of cash, they were trying to get a greater degree of political control. So we end up with a complete fiasco. Russia on one side is the only country who's feasibly offered some sort of funding. Russia has $500 billion worth of total bank reserves at the moment. So I wouldn't say that Russia is totally happy about lending this money, but it is in a position to do so if the Ukrainian economy can be stabilized and the Ukrainian government can be stabilized.
All right, Patrick, but, looking at the situation and the complexity there, I mean, why wouldn't Europeans have offered help to Yanukovych earlier in November, for example?
Well, that's, of course, absolutely a typical example of the European Union's complete inability to not manage to meddle outside their borders while being economically incoherent. They simply thought that there was a way to deliver democracy on the cheap and they could see some sort of incredible revolution in Ukraine, notwithstanding the fact that Mr. Yanukovych had already been democratically elected. So therefore, you saw the European Union jumping in and meddling because they were determined to expand their influence. The Brussels bureaucrats loved the idea of a free trade deal with Ukraine. And let's face it, why wouldn't they? They were going to destroy Ukrainian industry. They were going to stop the fridge manufacturers and others of Kharkov and other parts of the Ukrainian heartland from being able to export to the Russian heartlands and further to the east with products that effectively weren't going to sell in the Western markets. Moreover, agriculture, a staple of the Ukrainian economy, was going to be excluded because the most important thing you have to do in the European Union is you always have to cosset farmers, especially French ones. So this became a complete farce. It was a farrago. The European Union are doing exactly what they did in November. They're saying, of course, we're going to be here. We're going to provide money. Our checkbook is open. But unfortunately, somebody seems to have lost the pen.
All right, Patrick, thank you so much for giving us the economic perspective and explaining those things and how they might or might not work in the Ukrainian scenario. Patrick Young talking to me, an expert in global financial markets from the DV Advisors Group. Thank you ever so much.